1987, Sri Lanka. Seeking the goal of liberation, coerced killers form a suicide squad, the Black Tigers. Their fatal skills used for targeted assassinations.
The Tamil Tigers introduced female suicide bombers on an industrial scale.
September 5th, 1975, Sacramento, United States. Loyalty to a madman drives Lynette Fromme to raise her semi-automatic pistol to a president.
She believed that's what Charlie Manson would have wanted her to do.
March 30th, 1981, Washington, D.C., United States. Twisted logic and an intense obsession with actress Jodie Foster led John Hinckley to attempt the assassination of a U.S. president.
He believed that through this act, he would be linked to Jodie Foster forever.
June 5th, 1968, California, United States. Brainwashed or madness born from trauma, Sirhan Sirhan takes the life of Senator Robert Kennedy.
These individuals have a fixation on the target before they mount an attack.
Coerced killers follow direction, their thoughts controlled, their brains seized. They might fight for a cause, yet are often eager to please, desperate to fit in. Brainwashed assassins, thoughts controlled, programmed to kill. Assassins. Dangerous operators that strike suddenly with brutal consequence. Targeting world leaders, politicians, figureheads. Bringing chaos and discord to our world. Wreaking havoc to upend ideologies. They can be amateur opportunists, professional killers, or misfits hell-bent on fame. Assassins are on a deadly quest to leave a bloody mark, change society, alter the very course of history. Sri Lanka, 1976. A militant group formed to fight for an independent Tamil state in North and East Sri Lanka. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, aka the Tamil Tigers. Distinct in a very lethal way. Since 1987, they have had a specialist unit called Black Tigers. A suicide squad dedicated to assassination.
Throughout history, there have always been people who've been willing to give their life in order to undertake an attack of some sort.
As dynamite and explosives become more accessible, the number of assassinations by suicide attack increases.
The most famous, of course, is the assassination of the Russian Tsar, Alexander II, by a person using explosives. This sort of peaked in that period in the 1890s and into the early 20th century with the anarchist movement.
In the modern era, suicide attacks evolved. Bombs could be strapped onto clothing, sewn into vests, hidden in vehicles.
And the Hezbollah attack on the US Embassy in Beirut is probably the most significant initial attack in the modern era of suicide bombings and showed the power that you could bring, the devastating impact that one attacker, one suicide attacker, can bring through driving a vehicle that is full of military-grade, very dense, compact explosives.
The 1998 US Embassy bombing claimed the lives of 200 people. Inspired by Hezbollah's non-conventional fighting methods, Velupillai Prabhakaran formed the Tamil Tigers.
One of the most successful terrorist organisations in modern history is the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the Tamil Tigers.
Their suicide squad, the Black Tigers, assassinate Sri Lankan President Ranil Singh Premadasa. And former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi.
The Tamil Tigers introduced efficient ways of developing explosives belts, suicide vests, and also introduced female suicide bombers on an industrial scale.
Tamil Tiger leadership recognized that traditional clothing, loose-fitting layered garments worn by women, were perfect to conceal powerful explosive devices.
For example, having explosive devices in bras, and also having women pretending to be pregnant, and an explosive belt is hidden in the area that you would assume is the pregnant woman.
Black Tigers martyr themselves for the secular concept of the cause. It is an honor to be a Black Tiger.
What can make someone want to carry out an attack? And how do those who want to use suicide attackers recruit someone and have them voluntarily do this? It's very useful to have the idea of giving your life for a cause.
Every year, Maviranal, Great Heroes Day, is observed by Tamils. More acutely, the Black Tigers are celebrated in Karampuli now. The revered status of the fallen encourages the suicide assassin.
The individual attacker needs to be nurtured and supported by the group and reinforced that what they're doing is noble.
Malleable minds, nurtured to kill. Once on a mission, it's hard to turn back.
The Tamil Tigers, their leader, Prabhakaran, really had a cult around him essentially, so it was a quasi-religious in terms of him. If you were lucky enough in their system to be chosen for the mission, then you could have your last meal with Prabhakaran, the leader of your movement, which was an extraordinary thing for yourself and an extraordinary thing for your family.
Charismatic leaders groom susceptible minds, reprogramming an individual into an assassin.
We typically see that suicide attackers are around 16 or 17 through to mid-20s in range. So very idealistic and want to be able to change the world.
Using the voice of many to recruit, convince, compel, reprogram.
Secondly, it's engaging with that cause through another person and through a group.
They create a world where only one ideology exists. One way to think. One way to die.
The third piece is entering an echo chamber, essentially, where everything in the world can be explained by the cause that you're devoted to. And importantly for the broader group, it is cutting off the individual's access to or interest in accessing sources of any other information to explain the world.
March 10, 2009, Akuresa, Sri Lanka. As crowds of Muslims gathered to observe a religious holiday, a Tamil Tiger suicide assassin was preparing. The target, 6 government ministers who led a parade in celebration of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. As men beat drums and danced in procession, the killer moved closer. "14 people were killed, but of the ministers, only 1 was injured." The Tamil Tiger Suicide Squad have, over 30 years, carried out over 130 suicide attacks, killing more than 1,500 people. Using female suicide bombers on an industrial scale, developing new and efficient ways to kill, and influencing the future of how suicide assassins attack.
Into the modern era, we can see that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, all of these other groups that use suicide attacks drew upon the technology developments used by these organisations.
For the Black Tigers and many other assassins, the weapon of choice is the bomb.
Typically, the method of assassination will be dictated by the nature of the target, the nature of security, and the desire for tactical success.
The bomb stands out for its versatility. It can be concealed.
The suitcase containing the 50-pound bomb was placed in the hayloft bar by 2 men.
Detonated remotely. Driven, dropped, or flung in fury. Suicide bombing is a preferred terrorist tactic. The assassin is in control.
The car bomb exploded moments before Edward Shevardnadze was due to leave the Parliament building.
The advantage of an explosive device for an assassin is that escape is highly likely if it's done well. That you can actually not be at the location where the explosion goes off if you have some kind of like remote detonation device. Yet it can also be very effective and very lethal if your timing is correct.
A device detonated remotely might shroud the assassin in shadow, provide momentary anonymity.
You'd have a much greater likelihood of not being discovered if you use a remote device, such as a remotely triggered bomb to assassinate a public figure.
Authorities in Colombia say a car bomber's target was a government official.
As the weapons require closer physical proximity, your risk of also dying in the attack is raised, particularly if there's a heavy security presence.
Suicide attack or remote detonation makes infiltration of public spaces and proximity to targets more easily achieved. The bomb, strapped to a vest or flung in fury, set with a timer or triggered by suicide attack, it remains an incredibly effective weapon of choice for an assassin.
You hear about these atrocities, these bombs. You don't expect them to happen to you. But life must go on as usual.
The tools of an assassin's trade, a gun, a knife, poison, or a bomb, might still be utilized. But it is arguably the mind that is humanity's most powerful weapon. In the hands of a master manipulator, an ordinary citizen may be influenced to raise her gun to a president. The United States, 1967. A petty criminal fresh out of jail makes his way to San Francisco.
Charles Manson is really the cult leader par excellence in terms of the way in which he was able to captivate young people, particularly young women, and get them to carry out his actions for him.
It was the era of free love, and Manson latched onto it. Preaching from street corners in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, he cultivated a prophet-like personality.
Manson was always able to influence people from being a young man through his teens into his adulthood. Undoubtedly, he had huge charisma. Clearly, there were many people who felt very deeply that they were in the presence of someone very special indeed, and he used that to influence them in a huge way.
Manson mangled New Age aphorisms borrowed from self-help books, overheard from other street corner gurus, or pinched from organizations that masqueraded as religion.
Manson went for people who would believe in him. And they had to be people who had an open mind, who were open to his ideas, which to most people would seem crazy, but to somebody who was looking for world-changing beliefs, they seemed like the salvation for them. And of course, he had a healthy choice of people in the California area who fit that description. I think he also went for people who he felt attracted to, because there was a very clear sexual element to quite a lot of the membership of the group. So I think he targeted people.
And one of those was a 19-year-old homeless girl, Lynette Fromme. Manson met her in Venice Beach, Los Angeles. She'd run away from home, but was about to find a family.
He was able to create a coterie of young women in particular that were, to the outside world, talented, attractive to some people, and portrayed themselves as being an attractive group of people to hang out with. And that meant that there was a kind of optimism bias that this group must be onto something, they must be going places, and that had a real lure to the people who were then recruited later on.
Manson moved his followers to a remote location outside of Los Angeles, Spahn Ranch.
The hippie commune led by Charles Manson moved it into this old Wild West film set just outside Los Angeles.
The best way to control members is to isolate them from friends, from family, from work, so that the group and its leader and the belief system is really all that you have. So taking the followers to the Spahn Ranch meant that even more than ever, Manson was the only person in their lives. The Manson family and its mission was the only thing that was important.
Manson chipped away at their identities, administered hallucinogenic drugs, abused them physically, verbally, and sexually. Charles Manson would bombard them with his vision of helter-skelter, an apocalyptic war triggered by racial tensions. He brainwashed them to believe that murder would ignite the violence.
To ignite helter-skelter, to start the black-white revolution, Manson envisioned that white people would turn against the black man if they thought the black man had committed these 7 murders, and ultimately there would be a civil war between blacks and whites out on the street. Mr. Manson, in his mind, in his twisted mind, he envisioned that he and his family would be the ultimate beneficiaries of a black-white civil war.
I don't think Manson was insane. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was able to assess his weaknesses and his strengths. He was insane the way Adolf Hitler was insane.
Drugs and sex for Manson were part of the technological apparatus of his coercive control over his followers. a way of demonstrating falsely, of course, his love for the individuals who were in love with him.
Manson had achieved ultimate control over everyone that followed him. They would do anything he wanted.
You can't kill love. You can't kill the soul. And the love and the soul is in the penitentiaries, and it's in the jails, and those brothers and sisters are coming out soon.
Lynette Fromme has said, "I'm still in love with Manson today."
While Manson didn't take part in the spate of savage murders, his followers who had committed them had done so at his urging, on his behalf, under his influence. So he too was found guilty and imprisoned for life. But his influence and incoherent ideology remained alive in the minds of loyal members, such as Lynette "Squeaky" Fromme. Inside her brain, he remained.
And everything they did for him reinforced that part of their identity and made them feel stronger as a member of the Manson group. So Manson didn't have to be present in order to do that.
Fromme's loyalty to Manson continued long after his incarceration, moving towns to be closer to the prison he was held in. Lynette Fromme wanted to bring attention back to Manson and the family, and she also wanted to express her concerns about the Californian redwood forest by making a committed stand. Her plan? To take her gun and confront President Gerald Ford.
And this is where victims of coercion and abuse can quite easily also then become perpetrators themselves, carrying out the actions of the cult leader in order to benefit their overall ends. And for Lynette Fromme, she believed she was doing that for Manson, but also was doing it for herself because she believed so totally in him and in his ideology.
September 5th, 1975, Sacramento. President Gerald Ford made his way through Capitol Park. Fromme's weapon of choice, a semi-automatic Colt pistol. She strapped it to her leg and made her way through the crowd, where the president was meeting his supporters. There, she lunged at President Ford, pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. The pistol's magazine was loaded with ammunition, but there was no bullet in the chamber. As Fromme was subdued, she was heard to say, "It didn't go off. Can you believe it?"
But clearly, this was an attempted assassination. And it does appear that she was carrying out that act for Manson, that she believed that's what Charlie Manson would have wanted her to do, that she was carrying out part of the divine mission. And in doing it, she was reinforcing that core part of herself that believed very much in Manson and in his identity. If we don't do it for Charlie, what will happen?
Manson lived his remaining days incarcerated, his hate dying with him at the age of 83. Lynette "Squeaky" Fromme served 34 years in prison. She was released in 2009, still claiming to love Manson. But susceptible minds might simply be incapable of understanding the power master manipulators can harness. Scrambling minds, replacing ideologies, brainwashing an individual into an assassin. masters of manipulation might influence devotees, coercing mind, body, and spirit to kill. But when an individual becomes fixated or obsessed, they reprogram their own minds, convince themselves of a cause, drive their own obsessions to ultimate destruction. March 30th, 1981, Washington, D.C. John Hinckley Jr.'s obsession found him standing outside the Hilton Hotel with a .22 caliber revolver in his hand. He waited for the president to pass by.
Borderline erotomania is a term I came up with to describe individuals that form an intense attachment to another person that is oftentimes filled with anger and dysphoria, but they're still very attached to the person. That term could be applied to a fan that developed a very intense emotional relationship and believed that they were deserving of a relationship with that person.
Hinckley had developed an intense obsession with Jodie Foster after watching her in the film Taxi Driver. Screenwriter Paul Schrader, partly inspired by the media frenzy surrounding Lynette Fromme after her assassination attempt on President Ford, created a character who plots to assassinate a presidential candidate in the hope of winning the admiration of a young woman.
Hinckley believed that, and he actually wrote this to Jodie Foster, he believed that through this act of assassinating Reagan, he would be linked to her forever, and he would be connected to her. And in a sense, he was right, that by carrying out this attempted assassination, unfortunately he failed, his name continues to be associated with her for anybody that has studied her public life or has taken an interest in a public figure assassinations.
Twisted logic drove Hinckley's delusion. He believed killing President Reagan would win him Foster's heart.
So you see in borderline erotomania, you see a disparity between the factual basis of the relationship and what the person actually feels and thinks about the relationship.
As Hinckley's obsession grew, his behavior became increasingly erratic, stalking her while she attended Yale University, sending her letters and poems, and contacting her by phone.
From any kind of objective standpoint, his wishful thinking was quite irrational. His tethering to reality and his ability to distinguish between reality and fantasy, I think, was difficult at best. Yet, this was his intent, that he could gain a relationship with her and be linked to her forever through the assassination of a public figure.
Hinckley's weapon of choice? A .22 caliber revolver with exploding Devastator cartridges.
In the video clip of that assassination attempt, you will see two things happening with Reagan. You'll see a Secret Service pushing him into the automobile, into the limousine. And then you'll also see, secondly, a Secret Service agent getting as large as he possibly can to shield President Reagan, and was wounded in doing that.
Hinckley had studied the president's movements, planned and prepared for the attack. He'd positioned himself in close proximity to the president's limousine, adopting a shooter's stance and firing at a critically vulnerable time, the moment a target exits or enters a vehicle.
Hinckley's tactic was actually very simple and very clever. that he had been in a position to fire at Reagan where he could not be observed by the Secret Service agents until after he had fired the shots, one of which did wound President Reagan.
Hinckley's trial commenced about a year after the assassination attempt. But the United States government could not prove that Hinckley had the mental capacity to understand that his actions were a crime.
People often wonder if assassins are mentally ill. We know there is greater frequency of severe mental disorder in assassins when you look at the data. However, we also know that typically the mental disorder is not the primary motivation for the attack.
President Reagan survived the assassination attempt on his life. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
The defense in the Hinckley case was not that he didn't know what he was doing. The defense was that he knew what he was doing. He certainly knew he was shooting at the president and others and intended to do it, but that for some compulsion beyond that, he is being moved to do it.
He remained in the psychiatric hospital for over 20 years until granted limited release in 2016. Distracted from reality, obsessed individuals form fixations on public figures. Unchecked mental health issues feed into delusions, shape-shifting a former fan into a brainwashed assassin.
The question of whether assassins are born or made, I would answer that by saying that typically the life circumstance is going to set the stage for the individual actually attempting to carry out an assassination. But there may be predisposing characteristics in the personality of the individual, such as a mental disorder or a personality disorder, that could contribute to them thinking about and then deciding that this particular public figure needed to be targeted by them.
June 4th, 1968. A young man by the name of Sirhan Sirhan signed in at the Sun Valley Gun Club, Fish Canyon Road, Duarte. He spent the day shooting at targets with his newly purchased .22 caliber revolver.
It takes certain leaps of logic to get to the point where one decides that a public figure is to blame for the difficulties in your lives. But oftentimes these individuals do go down that illogical road.
A day later, Sirhan used the same gun to kill presidential candidate Robert Francis Kennedy at the Ambassador Hotel, Los Angeles.
Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin of Robert Kennedy, had both histrionic and borderline characteristics in his personality.
Histrionic characteristics in Sirhan's personality might be explained by looking into his early life. Born in Jerusalem to an Arab-Palestinian Christian family, Sirhan's early life was shaped by the maelstrom of the Arab-Israeli conflict.
During that time, he witnessed the death of his own brother. He witnessed other deaths. He was physically abused at home by his father. Eventually, the family relocated to Pasadena, California. And then father abandoned the family.
Sunny California, an alien world that seemed oblivious to the horrors of life in his homeland.
So Sirhan Sirhan had what we call a traumagenic background. He grew up amidst violence. There was violence at home. There was not any safety in the home. His father was abusive. As Sirhan did okay in his secondary education, He's a small, diminutive guy. He wanted to be a horse jockey, wanted to ride horses. Was physically injured in the fall that, in a sense, ended his career doing that. He also suffered the death of his sister, the woman he was closest to in his life. Yet, amidst all of this, he had what we call a idealizing transference toward Robert Kennedy. In other words, even though he didn't personally know Kennedy, he believed Kennedy would be a spokesperson and, in a sense, a political savior for the Palestinians.
When Kennedy promised to sell 50 fighter jets to Israel, Sirhan's idealization came crashing down. Declaring war on American humanity, Sirhan began fixating on a target at which he could vent his anger. As Sirhan's fixation bloomed, his interest in an occult group known as the Rosicrucians provided him with a way to channel his rage.
Rosicrucians, the ancient mystical order of the Rose Cross. Sirhan Sirhan did join the Rosicrucians. Although he was a Christian, he had become a Baptist for a while. Then he joined the Seventh-day Adventists, so he's clearly looking for something. The Rosicrucians, they were New Age before New Age existed.
Rosicrucianists believed that desire could be manifested through repetition. Sirhan Sirhan picked up a pen and a notepad. His diaries contained repeated phrases such as, "RFK must die."
Assassins, they typically move through 5 stages. The first is the formation of a personal grievance, where they feel that they've experienced a loss in their life. They're humiliated by that, they're angry about it, and then they blame the public figure for that loss. We have the ideation, the movement to the second stage. Within 24 hours, he's writing RFK must die, RFK must die, RFK must die, repetitively in his diary.
The third phase is planning and preparation. The research phase. The assassin plans the act, how they would attack, what weapons to use, when to do it, and how.
He wanted to do it on June 4th, 5th, or 6th of 1968 because this was the anniversary of the humiliation of the Arabic people in the Six-Day War in 1967.
The assassin then begins to test how close they can get to the target. What security apparatus, if any, exists?
Assassins invariably will rehearse in fantasy their attack. And they'll translate that also into what we call behavioral tryouts. So for instance, they may approach the target of the attack on multiple occasions to test their security. They may have fantasies of being very skilled with a firearm that they've decided to use, so they'll go to the shooting range to translate that fantasy into actuality, and they'll practice at the shooting range. And then the final stage is actually mounting the attack.
The Ambassador Hotel, Los Angeles.
And I hope that we have as good fortune in our campaign.
Robert F. Kennedy had just finished addressing campaign supporters and was making his way through the hotel kitchen. Planned and ready, Sirhan Sirhan stepped out, raised his revolver, and fired.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. today, June 6, 1968.
Then came the conspiracy theories, including one that Sirhan Sirhan himself would come to promote, that he was hypnotized, brainwashed to assassinate. And in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel, as Kennedy's party made their way towards the exit, a girl in a polka dot dress used a trigger word to activate the assassination.
I have my personal favorite conspiracy theory sometimes, and the girl in the polka dot dress is one of the greatest because Sirhan sort of invented it. It took him 42 years to come up with this story. Somebody had shown him a picture of the Ambassador Hotel, and you can see from the back somebody looks like they have the polka dot dress on.
In the immediate aftermath of the assassination, Sirhan Sirhan had recalled the events for the police and stated he wanted to plead guilty to avoid the death sentence.
His lawyer says that he was brainwashed because the CIA was doing MKUltra, this effort with the LSD and everything else to try to brainwash people. They must have taken Sirhan, they taught him a key word, a response word, that when they said it, he would then shoot Kennedy. He was back there, he remembers nothing, he blanks out, and he remembered this only 42 years later, but we've never found the woman in the polka dot dress.
Sirhan Sirhan, a brainwashed killer caught up in a conspiracy, or a simple-minded assassin with a pathological inability to take responsibility for his crime. Minds can be radically changed, thoughts erased and replaced. It's not just deranged cult leaders or despotic dictators who seek to control minds. Experimental mind control programs have been around longer than we might think. America, 1950s.
MKUltra was a CIA project, a secret CIA project that ran really for 20 years, from 53 to say 1973, figuring out how drugs might be used as forms of either getting information during torture or psychologically controlling somebody as an asset. We ended up using LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, which was a hallucinogenic that was around years before and became popular in the 60s. MDMA, today known as a club drug. They used heroin, they had barbiturates that were used, and magic mushrooms.
MKUltra was launched by agency director Alan Dulles.
So he takes over the CIA in 1953. Before that was military run.
But it was their chief chemist who really ran the program.
Sidney Gottlieb was a CIA chemist. He was the one who really was the chemical master of what was being run as MKUltra.
Through experimentation on the mind, the CIA believed they could create a troop of super agents impervious to interrogation, or use brainwashing techniques to turn adversaries into assassins. Under Gottlieb's direction, the agency gave liberal doses of LSD and other drugs to agents, psychiatric patients, soldiers, civilians, and even university students at institutions such as Stanford and Columbia universities. Some were willing participants. Others had no idea they were part of an elaborate and potentially dangerous experiment.
In one operation, Operation Climax, they actually had a situation in which they had prostitutes bring men to CIA safe houses, then give the men LSD secretly in their drinks and record how they reacted and what they were doing to see at what level they would lose control. This is taxpayer money. You can't make it up. And from 53 to 63, it was really run by a group of people at the top of the CIA that thought they would be able to find a new secret weapon to control agents.
The results more often yielded tragic outcomes rather than scientific insight.
Frank Olson was involved in the bacteriological warfare program at Fort Detrick for the US. He was given a dose personally by Sidney Gottlieb of the CIA's MKUltra program of LSD, and 9 days later threw himself off the Statler Hilton in New York City, killed himself.
At the time, Olson's death was ruled a suicide. But in the intervening years after Olson's family raised questions, the CIA agreed to a financial settlement. Then, in the mid-90s, Frank Olson's body was exhumed, and a second autopsy revealed injuries that were not consistent with the fall.
They were a result of murder beforehand. So the case remains unsolved as to whether he was murdered or not.
Mind control was thought of as a way to manipulate the brains of adversaries, programming them to commit nefarious deeds, betraying state secrets, even coercing them to assassinate their Cold War enemies like communist Cuban dictator Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro is the unbelievably successful revolutionary who took control of Cuba in 1959 and took it from a gambling oasis for the mafia and made it into a utilitarian communist society that was strictly aligned with the Soviet Union.
According to a retired Cuban Secret Service chief, Castro was subject to about 640 assassination attempts by the United States Central Intelligence Agency. They considered using bombs, poison, drugs, and the American mafia to oust Castro. Plans included arming large underwater shells or cigar cases containing explosives, dousing hand cream, handkerchiefs, or drinking liquids with a lethal dose of poison, and lacing his radio broadcast studio with LSD to disorientate and discredit him.
The CIA and the mafia want Castro out. They had every incentive to do it. America as a whole, not just the CIA, hated the idea that we had an outpost of the Soviet Union as we viewed it. It was really, Castro was very independent, but he needed the Soviet Union for all his financial support because we were doing an embargo on it. So we hated the idea that a Soviet outpost was 90 miles off Florida. And then the mafia wanted him gone because they wanted to recreate their casinos, which were an equivalent of a Caribbean version of Las Vegas. So they both had reasons to get rid of him.
MKUltra operated under a veil of silence to varying degrees through the 1950s and 60s. The program was abandoned after the mind control experiments were exposed to the public. In 1977, Senator Edward Kennedy, brother of Robert and John Kennedy, oversaw a congressional hearing investigation of the MKUltra program. The CIA's MKUltra mind control program was deemed a failure. And the drug LSD, harnessed by the CIA as the tool that would revolutionize mind control, became the drug of choice for the anti-establishment counterculture revolution that swept through America in the late 60s and early 70s. The tools of an assassin's trade, a gun, bomb, poison, or a knife might still be utilized, but inventive ways to kill will always be tried and tested. Technology will be harnessed to assassinate from a distance or up close and personal. But the mind, humanity's most powerful weapon, once manipulated, coerced, or driven by self-delusion, turns an ordinary citizen into an extraordinary and highly lethal killing machine. Turns an everyday individual into a brainwashed assassin.